Good morning and welcome into Contending Football, or I guess I should say good afternoon, as it is now past noon here on the East Coast. My name is James Flippin, and we're getting ready to take you through the next hour and get you ready for Week 11 in the National Football League. You can follow me on Twitter at Jamadrop, that's Jamadrop, and you can also follow this here, the network, on Twitter and on all our other social media platforms. It's The Contender with a K. And we invite you to download our app for both the iPhone and the App Store. If you're listening to us on thecontender.com, that's great, but you can get an even better audio experience by downloading our free app. We never play commercials. You won't hear a single commercial played over the next 50 plus minutes, as again, we get you ready for Week 11 in the National Football League. So please check out the Contender app. That's the Contender with a K. We are getting excited for the football action that kicks off at 1 o'clock. Of course, we'll take you through the short slate of 4 o'clock games as well. And then if there's time, get into those that Sunday night football game, I should say, that we'll have some time to talk about at the end. So the phone lines are open as well. You can give us a call here at 855-908-5668. That's 855-908-5668. Taking your phone calls as well this next hour. And we are live on Facebook. We're live on YouTube. We're live on Twitter. And, of course, we are live on The Contender. James Flippin here with you on Contending Football. Big week for football. Big time of year for football, obviously, as Thanksgiving is just days away now. It's the Sunday before Thanksgiving. And, you know, I and my fiance yesterday spent a lot of time getting ready for Thanksgiving. Not unlike a football team that might be going through its practices and blocking drills and tackling drills and all the trappings that come with getting ready for a football game. That was us in the house yesterday, except it wasn't tackling drills and blocking drills. It was Swiffer sweeps and counters being wiped down and clearing the cat hair away from railings and, of course, getting the bathroom spruced up. And my fiance just went out and bought some of the supplies that we need for Thanksgiving. Apparently, you can't have enough crackers and cheese, because I'm pretty sure if we were eating nothing but crackers and cheese on Thanksgiving, we'd have enough. But we also have the oil. I'm looking at the peanut oil right now. We're deep frying the turkey. Second year that we've done that. My mom will also be roasting a turkey and then carving that, bringing that up from South Jersey. I live here in North Jersey. But we will be deep frying a turkey. So feel free to get on the phone lines as well if you want to talk about some of your Thanksgiving prep, some of your Thanksgiving traditions. Of course, how that connects to football would also be appropriate. But the phone lines are open for whatever it is you want to discuss here in the next hour. 855-908-5668. That's 855-908-5668. And, this is a one-man band here. I don't have a call screener. So if you do call, make sure to speak as clearly as you can to the automated screening system, because otherwise, Shannon might come through as, like dancing or something like that. And I'm going to have to call you dancing in Kansas City as opposed to Shannon. So just make sure you say it as clearly as possible, but please feel free to call 855-908-5668. Yeah. So Thanksgiving prep is underway. One of the things that I don't really have to do is any of the sides, the vegetables, the stuffing, really not much in the way of food is on my plate, so to speak. No pun intended. I'm going to deep fry the turkey that day. My fiance and I will be making an apple pie. It's one of the things we enjoy doing, making a nice apple pie. I've got 15 people coming over to my house. All right. So we've had larger crowds in the past. We've gone all the way up to 25, 26, believe it or not. But we're down to 15. It's nothing related to, any sort of pandemic stuff. Last year was small because of that reason. But this year, we've just got some people that are with their other side of the family. Some people aren't making the trip out from California because they came recently for, excuse me, various things. This is where I should be able to use my cough button, but obviously I'm not fast enough to do that. There we go. All right, Thanksgiving prep underway. You call us and let us know what's going on for you, how you're thinking about football this time of year, what your favorite foods are. Thursday night games, by the way, it connects to Thanksgiving because obviously there's 3 games now played on Thanksgiving, which is, of course, a Thursday game. Now, Thursday night football is a fact of life. And we've come to get used to it. I know I have. It's hard. Rarely is that Thursday night game like so great or something where I just feel the absolute need to sit there and watch it all the way through from start to finish. But there's something comforting as a football fan and as a sports fan having a Thursday night game because it kind of shortens the week a little bit. The weekend and the football action that comes with it is a highlight of the week, right? It's something we all look forward to. But there's that little oasis now. There's that little respite where you get the game on Thursday night. And again, like I said, a lot of the time it's not a tremendous game. But we, the football fan, we, the sports consumer, have gotten used to having the game on Thursday night. Now, why do I bring this up? I bring it up not just because we've got 3 games coming up on Thursday with Thanksgiving, the holiday. But I bring it up because it's a legitimate thing that players have kind of brought up as a concern. The lack of recovery, the lack of rest time, the added strain that is put on players' bodies being required to play on Thursday after having just played on Sunday, let's say. Now, I would love to see the NFL get creative enough and proactive enough and kind of forward thinking enough to add the extra bye week and figure it out best it's possible. Because I know the math doesn't really work out exactly, or at least I don't think it does. But you try your best to make sure teams playing on Thursday are coming off a bye week. Or, going into one at least, whatever. Because it is a lot to ask of a football player. It's a lot to ask of any football player, really, at almost any level, but especially at the NFL. To turn around, you play on Sunday, and then you have to play several days later. Now, it's not a new debate. Like I said, like I alluded to at the beginning, Thursday night football has been around for a while, and we're used to it. And as football fans, we've come to, I don't know if the words take it for granted, but, kind of take it as a fact. But it's rough on the players, and you have to just wonder, as we become more safety conscious, as we think about things like, the CTE and repeated concussions, and, I don't have to tell you any fantasy football players out there just how often, for example, running backs are lost to injury. But those Thursday night games, we as consumers say, oh, you know what? Fire them up. Oh, it's like it's turning on Madden for the night. Oh, I want to play Madden, let's go. What does it matter that it's Tuesday at 5? That's a video game. Sure, that makes sense. But when you're talking about human beings and the rest and recovery and all that stuff, to the extent that it's possible anyway in an NFL season, really tough, those Thursday night games. And, Devin McCourty of the Patriots was the latest player to come out and kind of criticize that whole setup. And of course, they just blew the doors off the Falcons on Sunday. So not exactly, complaining or crying over spilled milk when you just won big, but maybe, Devin McCourty, a guy who's been around a long time, a respected member of the NFL, raising the issue. And it is something that you have to, it's something that you have to kind of think about in terms of what the future is going to be with all their collective bargaining and trying to come up with the future of the NFL and all this kind of thing. How many games in a season? Is Thursday going to definitely be locked in as part of that? I mean, you'd expect so, because the last thing the players want to do is leave money on the table. So if they're taking money away from the whole kitty by saying we're not going to play on Thursday, that doesn't behoove them towards getting more in the CBA. But, again, it's a catch-22. And of course, there are plenty of injuries to talk about. I wish there weren't, because that would be a lot more fun, but there are plenty to talk about. Kyler Murray looks like he's going to remain out with his ankle injury. So Colt McCoy will get the start for the Cardinals. You know, it's interesting. And Lamar Jackson is going to be out with an illness. I don't even know what it is that he's sick with. They say it's non-COVID. That's kind of, again, part of the world we live in now. Anytime somebody's sick, it's like, oh, well, it's not coronavirus, just so you know, not COVID. But he is sick with something. I guess the flu, or they've talked about dehydration being a concern for Lamar Jackson. So you figure maybe it's gastrointestinal. I really don't know. But both those guys, Kyler Murray and Lamar Jackson, at times you thought to yourself, these are leading candidates for the MVP. And if you look at the odds from DraftKings, both guys are listed as top 10 favorites as MVP candidates. But the top two names, according to DraftKings, are Josh Allen and Tom Brady. And Josh Allen even being favored a little bit on that. Interesting game for the Bills coming up. And so much of their offense obviously flows through Josh Allen. We'll talk a little bit about that. We'll get into all the games. You know, we've got all the different games here that we can break down. We can take your phone calls on any single one of them. It's 855-908-5668. 855-908-5668. Want to tell you a little bit about our app, The Contender. It's free. We are basically what we consider the future of local sports talk, because as much as I'm doing a national show here today and going around the league and getting you ready for week 11 and all that and the various teams in the NFL, we're much more of a localized sports talk operation where we do Chicago sports Monday, Wednesday, Friday, DC sports Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. And the future for us is, as we grow and as we become more capitalized, we'll have individualized apps for all these different cities where you follow your sports teams. So, think that classic sports talk station where they're taking your phone calls and, a companion for you constantly there right on your phone. Not necessarily radio in this day and age, but the constant audio that's right there on your phone. So please do download the app. It's The Contender. If you're checking us out on any of the social media channels, or if you're checking us out on thecontender.com, the app is now ready. And you can also use your phone to call us, 855-908-5668. That's 855-908-5668. So interesting to think about, who is the MVP at this point? I think at different times it was, fluctuating between maybe even a Derrick Henry could be considered a guy who maybe he could be a running back that in this day and age could actually win the MVP. Then he gets hurt. Preseason, maybe you were having dreams of a monster season for Patrick Mahomes, I should say. He's going to go out there and win the MVP. Well, again, he's still, according to DraftKings, a top 10 candidate, but he hasn't had the season anybody expected. Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, they've had flashes. They're also banged up. Matthew Stafford, he's a guy who I have identified as kind of the offseason move of the season in the NFL, going to LA, but he's cooled off a little bit. Dak Prescott, he's been a little injured, but again, he has that number 3 spot, according to the DraftKings odds, if you were going to bet, a futures bet on who's going to win that MVP. 855-908-5668 here on The Contender. It's Contending Football. But who is the MVP here midway? You can call us up. You can let us know. You can tweet us at The Contender. That's The Contender with a K. And let us know your thoughts on the MVP race here in the NFL. Other quarterbacks to watch from a intrigue and sort of injury perspective. We have Big Ben, who's coming back for the Steelers. We've got Cam Newton, who's already back for the Carolina Panthers. And according to head coach Matt Rule, he will be more or less the starter there in Carolina. Although I guess PJ Walker is going to play some. With Darnold on the shelf, it's both backup quarterbacks potentially in action for Carolina. And then, again, sticking with some of the quarterback stuff we're watching, I know our Chicago fans are keyed in on this one. Lamar Jackson not going to play today. So all eyes will be on Justin Fields and the question over whether or not he can take his next step to continue to, ascend and justify not only his first round pick status, but hopefully for Chicago fans, cementing himself as a franchise quarterback. And with the way that he started to play, that's not crazy. We'll talk a little bit about that, by the way. It's unfortunate that Lamar Jackson's out today, just period. You want to watch the best football you can watch, but maybe as a Chicago fan, you're thinking, okay, I'm not too broken up about it. But it would have been kind of nice to watch the, matchup between Lamar Jackson and Justin Fields, because I think if you're a Chicago fan, you look at a guy in Justin Fields, and there's been some talk. Justin Fields has talked about how much he admires Lamar Jackson, kind of overcoming that perception of him. When Jackson was coming out of Louisville, the knock on him was that he's a running back playing quarterback. And of course, MVP and all the success that he's had later, Lamar Jackson has quieted those doubters. Justin Fields is kind of hoping to do the same thing. Justin Fields doesn't want to be a guy who is looked at as just a 40 time. And really, Justin Fields hasn't shown, in my opinion, the full extent to which he can make an impact with both his legs and his arm up until this point. He's had some games where his rushing was productive, but he can be even better. And then, sticking with our two localized teams, I told you, if you heard us a few minutes ago, just kind of doing the promo for the Contender app, we also cover Washington sports. Taylor Heineke, could he be the guy? 1 week after the captivating drive, the game-winning drive that he put together for Washington football against the Tampa Bay Bucks, what's the story with Taylor Heineke? He very well could be the guy under center for Washington for the foreseeable future. Because the funny thing to me about the NFL, and it's not exactly the most scientific way of looking at things, but I feel like a lot of the time quarterbacks kind of show you that they're just not cut out for the National Football League. They're just not going to stick around for long. They don't make the plays on third down. They seem overwhelmed with different types of coverage. There's just kind of any given moment in a game where you think, we don't have a chance here. We don't have a chance. Taylor Heineke hasn't been that. I mean, he could be the guy, because up until this point, there's never been a consistent, drawn-out moment where you say to yourself, this guy can't play in the NFL. That hasn't really been part of his experience. He's had some moments where you say, I don't know. The mistakes are a bit much at this point. Can he ever be a guy who doesn't try to do too much or whatever? But, there's never been a moment where you say, Taylor Heineke just lacks the physical skills to be a starter in this league. And I mean, that's ultimately what you're kind of trying to get at. Yes, you would love to have a guy who, independent of everything else, seems like they could just win you football games on a consistent basis. Everybody wants to have Aaron Rodgers under center. Everybody wants to have Tom Brady. Everybody wants that. But by definition, only a few teams have that level of player. By and large, what you need is somebody who can at least play a bit at quarterback. And if you're realistic about it, if you're a realistic fan, it's not about accepting mediocrity or, but trust me, you want mediocrity, continue to chase quarterbacks in the first round. Continue to draft quarterbacks in the first day of the NFL draft every 2 to 3 years and see how that turns out for you. Research how that's turned out for NFL franchises in general. At some point, you got to say, you know what? This person, not half bad. Let's figure out how to accentuate their strengths. It's just like the head coach. It's just like the GM. I feel very strongly about this. You do potentially more harm than good by trying to chase down the next great thing in the NFL. So WFT, Washington football, you didn't ask for Taylor Heineke to be the starter. You thought it was going to be Ryan Fitzpatrick. But, as is something that happens to ancient quarterbacks, he got hurt basically right away. And here's Taylor Heineke. Could be the guy. Let's dive into some of the games, shall we? Let's get ready to talk about some of these football games here in the National Football League. And if at any point you want to join the conversation, please feel free. It's 855-908-5668 on the telephone line. 855-908-5668. And then you can also tweet us at The Contender. You can follow me on Twitter. That's my personal Twitter. That's Jamadrop, Jamadrop. And involve yourself with the conversation however you see fit. So Colts and Bills. We alluded to this game a little bit earlier. Big game for both teams, obviously. And, if you're in the playoff race at this point, obviously it doesn't even matter to say, oh, big game. If you're in the race, week 11, you're running out of time either way. If the Bills lose, they'll officially be behind the Patriots for first place in the AFC East. And the Colts are, kind of hanging around as a middling team. They're on their way to giving up a first rounder for Carson Wentz, which hurts in a way. But like I said with the Taylor Heineke, he's a starter, right? He's a starter for the National Football League. He's a guy who at least goes out there, gives you a chance to win, and on his best days, maybe even more. So the price that the Colts had to pay, having lost Andrew Luck, left scrambling and starting Jacoby Brissett, then they give all the money to try to squeeze one last good season out of Phillip Rivers before he hangs him up. Then you say to yourself, we need a starter. Let's give up at least, this for Carson Wentz. He needs to play over 75% of the team snaps, and then the Eagles get a first-round pick. Wentz has already been involved in 90% of their plays. So the Eagles are on their way to getting a first-round pick for him. And by the way, no need to get into any of that now, but the Eagles are going to have 3 first-round picks. They've got their own, obviously. And unless they, kind of go on a big run here, that's going to be a top 10 pick. They've got the pick in the trade they made with Miami. And then they're getting a first-round pick for Wentz. So don't look now, but you want to talk about jump-starting a rebuild. The Eagles are going to have 3 first-round picks. So as a Giants fan, I'm not loving that. I'll tell you that much. But anyway, back to Carson Wentz. The Colts are looking at a banged-up Bills team with Cole Beasley, their key slot receiver of the Bills. He's dealing with a rib injury, I think, rib or hip. And then Spencer Brown, starting offensive lineman for the Bills. He was on the COVID list. So, that whole situation comes down to whether or not he's vaccinated. And if he's vaccinated, then he can play as long as he's not showing symptoms, 2 consecutive negative tests, the whole thing. But if he isn't vaccinated, then he can't play. So I think his status was up in the air. So chances are he is vaccinated. And then Tremaine Edmonds, the linebacker for Buffalo, he missed last week's game with a hamstring. And I think his status is pretty much up in the air, but probably doesn't look good. I think he was doubtful going into the game. Buffalo favored by a touchdown. They're at home. So Vegas sees that as, a close game. And again, the Colts have a recipe to keep themselves in a game like this. They run the ball well. Jonathan Taylor, one of the league's best running backs. They're trying to make sure, Carson Wentz just doesn't make too many mistakes to kind of keep them in that type of game. And Buffalo has been, less explosive offensively, really leaning on Josh Allen. And, we'll see what kind of game he's able to have against that Colts defense, which is solid. All right, Washington and the Carolina Panthers. The Washington football team, obviously this is Ron Rivera's return back to Carolina, Riverboat Ron, as he was known back then. And it's pretty fascinating that Cam Newton is re-signed by Carolina just as Rivera is coming back to Charlotte. Meanwhile, as we talked about a little bit already, you have Taylor Heineke and the impact that he's been making for Washington. Obviously, the game against Tampa Bay was tremendous, and everybody's talking about that drive that he had at the end of the game. So, you are, from a football perspective, intrigued by Cam Newton resurfacing and obviously being back in the old uniform. Scored 2 touchdowns last week, 1 passing, 1 rushing. And his, ability as a rusher is undenied. And even as he's gotten a little bit older, he's still been effective running the ball out of the quarterback position. It's just with Cam Newton, you wonder what's going on with his throwing ability, because he was always a guy who had such a strong arm. And since some of the injuries that he's had with shoulders and, other stuff, I know last year there was a whole concern and kind of breakdown from a mapping out the plays perspective as to whether or not he could even throw it to the left side. All his plays were more or less to the right and kind of like centered on the flat. So it was kind of beyond coincidental, most likely. And then, of course, like I said, WFT coming off their huge win over the Bucs. They're at 3-6 on the season. And in the muddy, hard to figure NFC, Washington will at least be kind of playing relevant football into December if they can win this game. And the Panthers at 5-5, more of the same. The NFC has some openings in the playoff race for some of these not as great teams on paper to get in on the wild card. The AFC is less forgiving in that respect, but Panthers 5-5, WFT 3-6. Again, it'll be interesting to see what we see from Cam Newton today. And if you're into the whole revenge game narrative, then who knows what's going to happen with Ron Rivera. Maybe he'll get back to his riverboat ways and be doing some gutsy 4th down calls or going for 2 in a tie game or something like that. That's what he was known for, obviously, during his Carolina days. My name is James Flippin. You can follow me on Twitter at JamaDrop, and then you can follow our network, The Contender, on both Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok now. We're getting into the TikTok game. I resisted it. Really was not something I was keen on getting into, but you can only fight the trends so often, right? Or for so long. And at this point, it's like, all right, you know what? Check us out on TikTok. Let's see what we can do. I was going to make, I may make a video on TikTok because, the Contender, even though we're not a combat sport thing, we don't really focus much on like MMA or boxing or anything like that. The imagery and some of the branding that goes with our outfit connects into the boxing thing because we like to do the ringside bell, the ding, ding, ding. That's one of our imaging things that we use. And obviously just the term Contender, kind of invokes boxing and all that kind of stuff. So, I don't necessarily have any problem with that, but it's just not really something that we do as far as connecting to boxing or combat sports. But you do have that connection there. And I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I totally lost my train of thought because I have no idea where I was going with the boxing thing. I had a point that I was going to make, but now, of course, I can't remember. So that's on me. So this is what happens when you don't. I'm just going to blame my non-existent producer right now. I'm going to blame my non-existent producer because I feel like if I could be pointing at somebody right now and saying, remind me what I was going to talk about, they'd be there to say it, but it's all good. All right. Ravens and Bears. We kind of alluded to this game as well with the whole Lamar Jackson injury and then the Baltimore Ravens being without him. How does that change the narrative of this particular game? Justin Fields has said before this game that he really looks up to Lamar Jackson, and that's a situation that he maybe draws some inspiration from, considering that there's always going to be a question when you're a sub 4.5 40 time quarterback. The question becomes, can you? Oh, I remember. By the way, see, this is terrible. I just remember where I was going with the whole boxing thing. I wanted to make a TikTok about Rocky, the movie Rocky, because it came out today, back in 1975 or 73, whatever it was. And I think the pluckiness of Sylvester Stallone and his stick-to-itiveness and his never say die attitude and getting the movie made definitely connects to what we're trying to do here at the Contender. So boom, there you go. I'm not crazy. My brain is not completely broken. I remember what I wanted to talk about with the whole fighting thing. All right, back to the Ravens and Bears. If you it may interest you to look at Lamar Jackson's rookie year. Overall, he finished, he came in midway through the season for Joe Flacco. And he finished the season with 1,200 passing yards, 6 passing touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. He also led all quarterbacks with 695 rushing yards, and he added 5 rushing touchdowns. So if you look at Justin Fields' stats right now, he's passed for 1,280 yards. He's thrown for 4 touchdowns, and he's been picked off 8 times. So his numbers in the passing sense are really not that different than what Lamar Jackson did his rookie year. Rushing wise, like I kind of said, Justin Fields has not gotten untracked, I would say, as much as he could be from a rushing perspective. But he's got 288 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns. So, to me, my point kind of being, Justin Fields doesn't have to have a major boom, break out the blocks season here to still be in a very good position for future success. The transition that you make from the NFL to the NFL, from the college level to the NFL, is just absolutely tremendous for these quarterbacks. And I actually think that the guys who were more likely to rely on their rushing skills in college are going to inherently have a little bit of a harder time adjusting to the NFL. I think that's kind of counterintuitive because the way it maybe was looked at in the past, or that some people might look at it as, well, if they've got the ability to break the pocket and rush for the first down, or run more of an RPO style offense or whatever, then that's good for them as a developing quarterback because they have that in their back pocket. But I think it comes down to how difficult it is to find that balance as an NFL quarterback between how much should I be running, how much should I be holding the pocket, learning to manipulate the pocket, manipulate defenders with my eyes as opposed to trying to use my legs and break the pocket. That's a tough balance to strike. And when you're much more traditional and the offense is much more predicated on kind of keeping things contained and always within the pocket, or 9 times out of 10 within the pocket, the process is more straightforward. It's a more developmental point A to point B type process. And Justin Fields obviously has been kind of improving his play now over the past few weeks. So it's not outrageous to think that he's kind of on the upswing right now. But this is an opportunity where this Ravens defense has not been a killer by any shape or form. Matter of fact, at times they've been a funnel for passing teams. So I'm not suggesting that Justin Fields is going to go out there and dominate today, but it would sure be nice to see him play really well and bring the team up and down the field a few times. That's for sure. So Lamar Jackson not going to play, not feeling like himself going into the game today. It sounds like dehydration, kind of a concern. I don't know what it is he's dealing with, but you'd think it might be some kind of a stomach virus or stomach flu, whatever They do say non-COVID. It's a non-COVID disease for Lamar Jackson. So you got to get that out there these days. The Browns are kind of creeping up on the Ravens, by the way. The Ravens are at 6-3. The Browns are at 5-5. And the way the season started out for Cleveland, they have to at least be happy to get back to 500. But the Browns, with a very banged up Baker Mayfield, get the 0-8-1 Lions. And the Lions are 13-point underdogs heading into this game. Doesn't help that they'll have Boyle starting at quarterback with Jared Goff not able to make a go of it. And the Browns also get back Nick Chubb with this one. So all signs pointing towards the Browns getting over 500 today. And, the Bears are certainly hoping that they can put a chunk in the Ravens and put them at 6-4. So maybe that AFC North is tightening up a little bit. We've talked a lot about development of quarterbacks today and how that situation is just an ongoing reality for many, many franchises around the league. This next game we're going to talk about, 49ers, Jaguars. Leave out the 49ers part of it because Trey Lance has just been more or less on the bench all season. But, Jimmy Garoppolo has kind of held on to that job. And the Jaguars, however, they started the number one pick overall from jump in Trevor Lawrence. And it has not been a strong go of it for him up until this point. The season for Lawrence has not been a good one, and they've really struggled to move the ball at times. And, he has not per se played very well. So I read an article, it was in CBS Sports, where they talked about how there's kind of some dissension amongst the ranks of the head coaches for the Jaguars, where they talk about what the best solution is for Trevor Lawrence. How do you try to overcome these struggles that he's had? What's the coaching response to that? And the article was talking about how there's one school of thought that the offense that Lawrence ran in college, the RPO, the run pass option, where you have that running back right alongside you, you take the snap, put the fake handoff in the belly, and then either keep it for a pass or, run it yourself. That offense is by and large not totally in vogue in the NFL, or kind of more used as an option, a part of an offense, a piece of an offense, than it is the main course, because of the strain it puts on the quarterback and because of the hits that requires the quarterback to take. Look, years ago, you talked about how you never really ran the option in the NFL because of the stress and the strain and the physical problems that you're putting on a quarterback by making them into the main ball carrier 9 times out of 10. And of course, you run the option, even if you do hand the ball off or pitch it or whatever it may be, you pass it, you're talking about taking big hits, even on plays where you get rid of the ball. So the question is, should Lawrence be put back into an offense that he succeeded with at Clemson, succeeded big time, at the risk of him taking more hits and potentially being put in harm's way from an injury perspective? It's not an easy decision. It's definitely not an easy process from a coaching staff perspective, from a general manager perspective, the investments that you put into these quarterbacks, all this kind of thing. And as much as anything, it's because nobody really gets through losing the starter and holds up as a competitive squad 9 times out of 10. Not too many teams are going to go out there and have much of a chance on Sunday with their backup under center. So Trevor Lawrence, he's 6'6", 220. Sounds good. Sounds like a guy who should be able to take those hits and, keep coming back for more, all that kind of stuff. But that's not the be-all or end-all. It doesn't really matter, in other words. It's actually kind of just about trying to avoid contact as much as possible because it's just kind of a numbers game. The more times you get hit, the more amount of plays you have that involve significant contact, the more often you're going to get hurt. And it just doesn't really work in the NFL to throw caution to the wind and say, quarterbacks, they get hurt. Players get hurt. And we're going to just have to have the next man up mentality. Next man up, that's the mentality with the NFL. Sure, absolutely. Guess what position that doesn't work at? Quarterback. Doesn't work. Whether it's the timing and the nuance and all the reps with the ones that involve preseason and practice week after week after week. Of course, you imagine the talent gap between whoever the starter is versus the backup and the way the quarterback position just matters so much in the NFL. Next man up doesn't work when it's the quarterback. So you could talk about, do we get Trevor Lawrence back to a level of success and comfort by running the run-pass option more often and acknowledging that he's going to take some hits and all this kind of stuff. But, that's not going to be a real recipe for success long-term. Sticking with that actual game, Jaguars and 49ers, the 49ers will be without Eli Mitchell, who had finger surgery and tried to make it go throughout the week, but he's going to have to be out. You do have Kittle back for the 49ers, and what a difference that makes for their offense at tight end. We definitely have some people who were saying, Kittle, he's old now, banged up, injuries, all this kind of stuff. But look, when he gets healthy, big difference for that 49ers offense. And you have Brandon Ayuk, who's kind of coming alive for them. So the 49ers offense is definitely trending up. They're favored by 6.5 points in this one, and James Robinson is playing for the Jaguars. But yeah, look, if I'm the Jaguars coaching staff, I think you probably have to start working RPO in maybe more often than you did and try to get back to some semblance of what Lawrence did well previous to his stop here in the pros and try to kind of get some of that dynamic playmaking back, because whatever they're doing right now, it's not working. Packers, Vikings, interdivision matchup. A lot of people like Minnesota in this one, and Vegas has it as basically a pick 'em. Green Bay's favored by a point there in Minnesota, so the odds makers definitely agree that this one could be ripe for a Minnesota win. No Aaron Jones for Green Bay. That is a big loss for them. I think that that the holy triumvirate, as we've talked about on this show before, with Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams and Aaron Jones, you could make the argument that Aaron Jones is the second most hard to replace player there for them. Of course, Aaron Rodgers, that goes without saying, but Aaron Jones is a massive part of that offense. He's a tremendous receiver out of the backfield. He's a tough runner, no matter where he goes, inside, outside, the whole thing. And it'll be on A.J. Dillon to step up and fill the void for Green Bay. By the way, Patrick Peterson has been activated for the Vikings in this game. So Patrick Peterson will be in the defensive secondary for Minnesota in this game. All right, checking out the 4 o'clock games. We've got Bengals, Raiders. We've also got Cowboys, Chiefs. We've got Cardinals, Seahawks. And then the Sunday night football game is Steelers, Chargers. It's going to be interesting to see how that Steelers offense does, bringing Big Ben back. And that hasn't necessarily been the, answer for them up until this point. But you saw with Mason Rudolph, and they didn't even try with Dwayne Haskins, that, again, not to belabor the point, but you don't necessarily have much of a chance in the NFL when you start your backup. It's just, even a guy like Big Ben, who is obviously not the player he once was, has clearly lost some zip off his fastball, so to speak. Even still, you're talking about a situation where you don't have your starter and you're asking for problems. All right, we'll take a quick break. When we come back, we will talk about those 4 o'clock games, Sunday night games, and get anybody in on the phone lines if they want to join here. 855-908-5668. It's Contending Football.
The Contender.
I've been getting multiple questions about Mac Jones and about whether or not he is a perennial starter. Is he someone that is even worth rostering, even as a QB2? Here's what I would say to that. I would say that if you are in a redraft league, Mac Jones, you can cut ties with him right now. If you're in a keeper league, however, it might be in your best interest to hold on to him and see how this season plays out. We've seen this story before where a quarterback is in a situation with a team that's still trying to figure out where they're going, which the New England Patriots are, and that quarterback might tread water for a while, and then before you know it, week 10, week 11, week 12 rolls around, and all of a sudden Mac Jones finds it. And that idea that you had on draft day that Mac Jones might be worthy of being a keeper ends up coming true. And if you are in a keeper league and you had some sort of investment in Mac Jones, you don't want to miss out on that just yet. So I would hold on and I would pay attention to what he's doing week to week. The key here with Mac Jones, if you are going to keep him, is not so much what's he doing every single week as far as the stats are concerned. What is he doing to improve? Are his turnovers going down? Is he showing better ball control? Is he calling a better game? And if he, look, I mean, Tom Brady didn't start off being Tom Brady right away. Mac Jones could all of a sudden just turn it up.
Go with your gut, the show that talks fantasy football on The Contender.
Can we just keep somebody out of the end zone? Can we hold some people to field goals? All I see, it feels like all I see is Dustin Hopkins coming out there and trying to kick something. And then all of a sudden, we see a stat line, Taylor Heineke gets 182 yards or something like that. What are we doing? Can we score? I wonder what it feels like. Honestly wonder what it feels like to score points. I just want to know. Like, imagine like the Falcons when Kyle Shanahan was the offensive coordinator when they went to the Super Bowl and screwed it all up. Imagine scoring all the points. Imagine like being on Aladdin's magic carpet and just soaring the 7 seas and just all of a sudden seeing touchdowns score left and right. Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be nice? Damn it. I just wish for once we could score a point. I mean, it feels like, yes, okay, we can go out there and score, 17, 20 points on a regular basis because we get lucky sometimes. But letting in, I mean, this is embarrassing. 29 points, okay, is at least 4 touchdowns. We would be lucky to see the Washington football team score 4 touchdowns. We'd be lucky.
The DC Crossover Podcast with Ben Simpson and Mike Cerrone. Sports talk and other aspects of life. Streaming on The Contender and available for download.
All right, welcome back to Contending Football. My name is James Flippin, and you just heard from some of our shows here that we have on The Contender. That was the voice of Joey Baboots, our announcer at the end, but you also heard Mike Cerrone talking about some of the frustration that comes with being a WFT fan, but, not after last week. Not after last week. And you may be interested to check us out later today, as one of the things we always do here every football Sunday is we have post-game coverage of both Washington football and also the Chicago Bears. As I kind of alluded to or talked about in detail earlier today, we cover Washington and Chicago sports here on the Contender app, and it's all about recreating that localized sports talk experience that you know and love. We're also talking about the 4 o'clock games here as we roll along on Contending Football. It is week 11 in the National Football League. And one of those 4 o'clock games, it's a great game on paper. Both teams at 5-4, having had their moments throughout the season. We're talking the Cincinnati Bengals and the Las Vegas Raiders. The Bengals with the up-and-coming young gunslinger, with Joe Burrow under center. And then, of course, the now established veteran Derek Carr in Las Vegas. Cincinnati's favored by 1.5 here. Again, based off both the record, kind of the feel of the game, and then with the odds makers weighing in, it certainly feels like one that should be close. Interesting that the Bengals, I think, are starting to get more dangerous as that offense, all of its weapons are kind of rounding into form now, it feels like. You've got Joe Mixon, who's getting healthy. You've got T. Higgins, who's kind of reclaiming that status as one of the league's up-and-coming receivers, perhaps. You have, obviously, Chase, for the Bengals, the rookie that they took out of LSU, and what he's been doing for them. Even Uzomah at tight end has had his moments for the Bengals and, kind of quietly is putting together a pretty nice season. They've got a lot of weapons on offense, those Cincinnati Bengals. There's been times where they just, have kind of disappeared for whatever reason, both as a unit and, individually, some of their offensive outputs have just not been kind of like the sum of their parts in a way. But I do like what Cincinnati's built here. And I think the Raiders, with all that they've gone through up until this point, just the off-the-field stuff, the loss of their head coach, I don't know. I wonder how much longer they're going to keep holding it together. And this would be a massive win for the Raiders. But I'm picking Cincinnati if I had to take one. All right, Cowboys and Chiefs. We've got Kansas City favored by 2.5 points here. Huge game for Dallas. Always is when you can get a win here. And then they're playing on Thanksgiving, obviously, as they always do. You run off a couple of wins here for Dallas. And, of course, Kansas City has not been the juggernaut anybody expected them to be. That's where you're talking about getting through that built-in little kind of second bye for Washington. They've always done well as a unit, Dallas, when they can win going into Thanksgiving. And then if they can win again on Thanksgiving, you're talking about a massive little, boost to a playoff run, I should say. So, for those Cowboys, they're obviously hoping to keep the Kansas City offense from exploding, which hasn't necessarily happened for them up until this point. But if it's a shootout, then that might be the game a lot of television sets are tuning to in this 4:00 slate, because you want to talk about offenses that can cook with gas. Now, Amari Cooper is going to be out for Dallas. So they get Michael Gallup back, but then lose Amari Cooper. CeeDee Lamb has really been the number one receiver for them up until this point, but that's going to hurt for Dak Prescott to not have Cooper for sure. And we'll keep an eye on that. Cardinals, Seahawks, been a rough year for the Seahawks up until this point. Obviously, the loss of Russell Wilson for as long as he was out, and he's now back. Kind of shoe is on the other foot now, this particular game, because the Cardinals continue to deal with the absence of Kyler Murray. He has not been officially ruled out yet ahead of the 4:00, but he's likely out with his ankle injury. And that means Colt McCoy for Arizona. DeAndre Hopkins already ruled out for the Cardinals. So, that's tough for the Cardinals to be that banged up offensively. You say to yourself, all right, can James Conner kind of carry the load? Now, the Seattle defense has not been good. This is in Seattle, so we'll see if the 12s can make an impact in a home divisional matchup there. But another thing with Seattle, Chris Carson officially done for the year. And, he's just been kind of banged up all year long. And he's a guy that's always banged up. I don't know if it's just the way that he runs. He runs to contact. He's a physical runner, and he just can't really ever stay healthy. The situation with him now being done for the year, you wonder, can Rashad Penny step up and claim that mantle for Seattle as the number one running back? Because he kind of feels like he's always been the waiting to break out guy there. Rashad Penny has always, for several years now, been the guy that you're kind of waiting to break out in Seattle. And it just hasn't necessarily happened. But if it ever is going to, now's the time. And that particular game going to be tough for Arizona to go into Seattle and win with Colt McCoy. But, look, crazier things have happened. 855-908-5668, 855-908-5668. I want to hear from people. And here's the thing. You can email me as well. Email me, flippinoutradio@gmail.com. And let me know what you're doing for Thanksgiving. What are your favorite foods, the tradition that you have to follow? Do you have the touch football game out in the yard? Is it sit down and watch that first game right at noon and kind of just stick through with the football now going all the way to the nighttime? We've got the Thursday night game. It's not just the 2 games on Thanksgiving anymore. We've got the 3. So, contact us here at the Contender. Download the app. Tune in next week when we do Contending Football again, and you can let us know how your Thanksgiving went. And you can keep us keyed in on your traditions as we make our way through the days leading up to the great Thanksgiving holiday, which is, of course, a food holiday, a football holiday, and a family holiday. So what more could you ask for? What more could you want? The Sunday night football game will have the Steelers and Chargers squaring off. And Big Ben is going to be back for Pittsburgh. There won't be any Joey Bosa for the Chargers. He's been ruled out. That's either concussion or COVID, or I can't keep up with all this. But it just suffice it to say Bosa is not playing for LA. But Big Ben will be back, and he was a coronavirus. Big Ben was COVID, couldn't play. Now he's back. So Pittsburgh fans are happy about that because there just wasn't a lot going on with Mason Rudolph, unfortunately. You were lacking something there with Mason Rudolph. And, sad to say that the saga that is Dwayne Haskins has not gotten any better in Pittsburgh. If you're one of our WFT fans, then you obviously know things didn't end well or kind of ever go well for Dwayne Haskins. And, well, I shouldn't say ever. There was that one game that they won, and then he was like taking selfies with the fans on the sideline or something like that. Obviously, that game up until that point went well for them. But other than that, things did not work out for Dwayne Haskins in Washington. So he gets signed as a backup in Pittsburgh. The last week with Big Ben out, you would have thought you might have had the opportunity there to get a crack and get into the game, Dwayne Haskins, but apparently he wasn't taking things seriously during pregame warmups to the point where he didn't even get a chance to get into the game. So anyway, that's not too good. I'm James Flippin. This is Contending Football. We'll catch you next time.